Brazil has become urbanized since 1950 in a pace that nobody else has. So you have large urban areas which are perfect for Aedes aegypti, and you have a lot of people living in areas that are in the comunidades that do not have good services, a lot of people living very close together, a lot of containers, caixas de agua, nemos, etc., that provide perfect habitat for the mosquitoes. So I think Brazil is, in a way, an extreme example of the southern world that has all the right conditions for transmission of dengue, Zika, chikungunya, etc. That is $1 million question. I mean, clearly Zika came to many places. Colombia, Puerto Rico had a huge outbreak of Zika. The question is, why didn't we have as much microcephaly? And we don't know for sure. We think it's probably related to the fact that so many people have been exposed to many strains of dengue beforehand. Dengue and Zika are very closely related. People have called Zika dengue 5, in addition to the dengue 1 to 4. And that is a partial explanation, but the truth is we are not completely sure. And even in Brazil, it's mainly northeast Brazil, Recife in Salvador, we haven't had it to those extent, not in Sao Paulo, not in Belo, not even in Rio. So we are not completely sure. I think it's mostly related to prior exposure to related viruses. They had an outbreak, especially in Yap Island in the mid-2000, 2007 I think was a big outbreak. They have not had a big outbreak since then. And I think, we don't have much Zika in Brazil right now. And I think a lot of it is because when Zika came, there was a completely susceptible population. Everybody was vulnerable. It swept like a wildfire. Enough people got it that we now have herd immunity, which means enough of the populations are immune to Zika, the transmission is not that easy. I would say that in several years we may have another outbreak of Zika in Polynesia, in Brazil. That's because unlike dengue, where we have 4 different strains, with Zika it's only one strain that gives lifelong immunity. I'm also optimistic that we'll have a vaccine for Zika before we have a vaccine for dengue. Zika originated from Uganda, from the Zika forest in Uganda, and moved around pretty quickly. It's not clear that it actually changed a lot after it came to Polynesia. Between what it was found in the 1940s in Uganda and what happened in Polynesia, it's hard to tell because we don't have so much data. But since then, it seems to be a very similar virus in Brazil, in Puerto Rico, in Colombia. Whether it will change, so far it hasn't. It's hard to say. It's true that those are RNA viruses that can change quite quickly, but it hasn't happened yet. I think so. I mean, it seems like people call it the cockroach of mosquitoes because it's so adaptable. And it is a vector of yellow fever, it's a vector of dengue, it's a vector of Zika. I would not be surprised if it could become a vector of another virus. When I talk about what happened in Salvador, I talk about new enemies, Zika and chikungunya, old known enemies like dengue, and the ones that, the friends that we thought were gone, yellow fever. And they're all there together. So clearly Aedes aegypti, because of its habitat, where it lives, because it only feeds on humans, is pre-adapted to transmit viruses. I would be surprised if we'll not find another virus that it will transmit. Not only in Brazil, everywhere. I think the key is surveillance, which means spending a lot of time on public health, spending a lot of time on giving tools and money to public health posts, to physicians, to nurses, to community leaders, to find out very quickly if we have something. If we catch the first case, we can do a lot. If we wait another week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it is much later to control an epidemic. Beyond that, I think investment in infrastructure and dealing with inequality is obviously the key. I mean, that is at the heart of nearly all the neglected tropical diseases as they are called. I've collaborated with researchers all over the world, and Brazil has been my favorite place to collaborate with because it's a true collaboration. I've had students come here, I go there a lot, the students are outstanding. It really is a true collaboration and a very productive one. I think we each give something to each other, we work very well together, we are friends, we like doing the work together. We could show very early a temporal connection between women that were infected during the first trimester and the appearance of microcephaly later on. That was only because it's such a good collaborative group that works so well together. Not enough. Again, we have investing in public health surveillance is not very appealing. I like to say it's not very sexy. So I did a lot of work. We didn't have an epidemic, so I said, oh, why did you waste all that money? Nothing happened. And I've worked in many states, in many parts of the US, and generally the public health departments are underfunded everywhere, not only in Brazil, not only in Kenya, in the US as well. So the key is to invest in good surveillance, in mosquito control early on, dealing with larvae, in sufficient funding for public health nurses and physicians that will catch cases early on. A colleague of mine, Gonzalo Vazquez-Procopec, who is also in this department, and I wrote a paper a while back about the cost of not catching an early dengue case in Florida. And we have shown that if you catch it very early on compared to 2 weeks later, you save millions and millions of dollars. But nobody wants to invest in those, kind of unexciting activities. So I think that is a real challenge. I think the problem is that, we are talking, first of all, microcephaly is only the tip of the iceberg. We are all kind of other, complications, neurological complications, ear, eye, etc. I think we still have not seen all the impacts of the Zika infection. And the challenge is that, this is for life. The question is, how will Brazil, a country that is struggling economic crisis right now with a government that is not prioritizing public health efforts, how will deal with the huge cost of every baby that has microcephaly? So I'm not sure how to answer that. I think it would be a huge challenge even for Switzerland, as an example of a rich country. I'm not sure what to do. And I also think, in the beginning it was in the news. Everybody talked about it, everybody came, people from all over the world talk about microcephaly, there was attention. I'm sure that the woman in Pau de Lima or where you interviewed in Recife, they're going to be left alone, I think that is the real challenge. So not only the physical well-being of the children and the woman, but the psychological stress. You really need a team of social workers, psychologists, and physiotherapists, physicians, nurses. I'm very impressed with the Brazil, health system, with the, health posts and everything. I've worked with them. They don't have the resources. You usually have, 1 or 2 physicians that are stretched to the limit. So I don't have an easy answer. I think Zika has been a big surprise. In the beginning, when Zika first came, I was in Salvador. We had an outbreak of Zika, and we said, this is really interesting. We can follow it because we work with the public health system. We described the epidemic curve, how it went up and down. We thought, okay, a mild disease, a little fever, a little rash, you get over it, you're immune for life, much better than dengue or chikungunya. And then we had the Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a neurological complication. Then we have the microcephaly, which is very atypical. Other viruses are known to do that, but it has not been known for the flaviviruses like, dengue and chikungunya and Zika. So Zika has been full of surprises. The fact that it can be transmitted during sexual intercourse. It's not a very important mode of transmission. And we should pay attention to the vector. But that again is very unusual. So it's a virus that has made a shift from the forest mosquito monkeys cycle to an urban mosquito humans, and it's adapted in a way that we were not ready for it. I'm not a virologist, but I've talked to virologists, and it's a surprise. And I think what I mentioned before, I think we don't know yet all the impacts. The microcephaly, or if you had a miscarriage, were horrible immediate, results. But the later complication, because it's maybe in the brain, because it may affect your vision or your hearing, I think we just don't know everything about Zika yet. It is very disturbing and scary.